He was holding it wrong. That's what they said. Not quietly, not to themselves. Out loud, with the confidence of men who had never been wrong about anything that mattered. The old man at the line didn't react. He just stood there with that lever gun pressed against his shoulder, eyes settled behind iron sights that hadn't changed design, since most of these boys' grandfathers were in diapers. And he waited. They had AR platforms with triggers tuned to a 2-pound break. They had red dot optics, zeroed to within a quarter inch. They had carbon fiber handguards and compensators, and 30 rounds in the magazine before the first shot left the barrel. They had driven 4 hours and spent $4,000 to be here, and every single one of them looked at this gray-haired old man in his worn field jacket, holding a lever-action 30-30, the way a mechanic looks at a horse-drawn cart pulling into a Formula One pit lane. One of them pointed, actually raised his arm and pointed, the way you point at something that doesn't belong. His buddy laughed. Someone else said, loud enough to carry, "Somebody tell Grandpa the cowboy competition is next weekend." The old man said nothing. He adjusted his ear protection with one hand, slowly, without looking down, the way a man adjusts something he has worn 10,000 times before. And he waited for the buzzer. When it sounded, steel plates hit the ground so fast that 2 people in the gallery took an involuntary step backward, certain something had malfunctioned. Not missed, not jammed, malfunctioned, because what they heard did not sound like a lever-action rifle being cycled by a human hand. It sounded like a belt-fed weapon finding its rhythm. Every plate was down, not one left standing. The range went quiet the way ranges go quiet when something has happened that nobody has a word for yet. If you believe that a lifetime of practice is the one thing money cannot buy and mockery cannot touch, type legend in the comments right now before we go any further. Because what happened next at Fort Trace Rifle Club on that cold October morning is the kind of story that only makes sense when you know who Gregory Jennings is. And to know that, we have to start at the beginning. Fort Trace Rifle Club had been carved out of the eastern Tennessee tree line 15 years ago by the kind of men who showed up on Saturdays with chainsaws and post-hole diggers and did not leave until the work was done. They poured the concrete for the shooting bays themselves. They welded the steel target frames in somebody's garage and hauled them out in truck beds. They built the main pavilion over 2 weekends in August, working in heat that would have sent younger men inside. And when it was finished, they stood back and looked at it with the particular satisfaction of people who have made something out of nothing, using only their own hands and their own time. That was 15 years ago. The club was still standing. The concrete was still solid. But something had shifted in the years between then and now, quietly and without announcement, the way a river changes course. Not all at once, but grain by grain, until one morning you look up and the water is somewhere it wasn't before. The tactical shooting boom had found Fort Trace the way it found every club in the region, through younger members, faster equipment, and the gravitational pull of competition formats that rewarded speed above everything else. It was not a hostile takeover. Nobody voted on it. It just happened, the way cultural shifts always happen, gradually and then completely. The sponsored shooters started showing up. The hard-sided cases on wheels replaced the soft bags. The conversations in the parking lot stopped being about hunting seasons and started being about trigger jobs and split times and which red dot held zero better in the rain. The Ironside Open became the centerpiece of all of it. 3 states sent competitors. A firearms retailer out of Knoxville set up a booth every year and ran discount codes for anyone who placed in the top 10. A 2-man YouTube operation with 50,000 subscribers filmed the whole event and posted it in 3 parts, and the views climbed a little higher each year as the production got tighter and the competition got faster. It was, by every measurable standard, a success. The older members, the ones who had dug the post holes and welded the frames and poured the concrete, still showed up on Tuesday nights. They shot their rifles in the back bays, talked for a while, packed up, and went home. They had stopped entering the competitions about 3 years back. No meeting was called about it. No announcement was made. It was simply understood. The way certain things become understood without ever being said, that this was not their event anymore, that the culture had moved on in a direction that did not require their participation. They accepted it the way men of a certain generation accept most things, without complaint, without explanation, and without anyone outside their circle ever noticing they were gone. Gregory Jennings noticed. He pulled into the parking lot at 7:15 on a Saturday morning in October, and he noticed everything. He was not a large man. He had probably never been a large man, even in his prime. But he carried himself with the kind of economy that makes size irrelevant. Every movement deliberate, nothing wasted, nothing performed. Lean frame and a worn olive field jacket that had faded to the color of old moss. Close-cropped white hair. A face so deeply lined it looked like a topographic map of somewhere difficult. The creases cut not by age alone but by sun and wind and decades of squinting at distances that most people would need a scope to see. He carried a canvas sling bag over one shoulder and a single box of ammunition in his left hand. That was everything. No range cart, no hard case on wheels, no tactical belt with magazine pouches indexed along the left side. No timer clipped to his collar, no hat with a manufacturer's logo, no performance shirt with a sponsor embroidered on the sleeve. Just the bag, the box, and the lever-action rifle slung across his back, with a leather sling so old and dark with handling that it had stopped looking like an accessory and started looking like part of the gun. He walked past the competitors unloading in the parking lot the way a man walks past traffic, aware of it, unbothered by it. The hard cases on wheels, the range carts stacked with ammunition cans and cleaning kits and backup pistols in molded foam, the tactical gear laid out on tailgates with the careful arrangement of men who had spent real money and wanted it to be seen. Gregory moved through all of it without pausing, without looking over, without registering any of it on his face. The volunteer at the registration table was a woman named Patrice who had worked every Ironside Open since the second one. She smiled when Gregory approached and slid the form across the table. He filled it out in slow, deliberate handwriting. Name, age, club affiliation, none. Firearm, lever action, 30-30 iron sights. Patrice looked at what he had written, and then looked at him and then looked at the form again, the way a person looks at something twice, not because they misread it, but because they are deciding what to do with it. She handed him his number without comment. He pinned it to his jacket and turned toward the range. He was 20 yards from the staging area when it happened. A broad-shouldered man in his early 30s, standing with a group near the end of a black pickup truck, looked over at Gregory's rifle and then looked at the group and said it loud and easy. The way men say things they are certain will land. That old man is holding it wrong. The group laughed. Gregory heard it. He reached up and adjusted his ear protection with one hand, the same slow, practiced motion, and kept walking. He had heard louder things than that. In places where being wrong cost considerably more than a laugh. The first stage was designed to be simple. 8 steel plates at 20 yards, set at shoulder width apart on a horizontal rack, each one the size of a dinner plate. Start position with the rifle loaded and shouldered. On the buzzer, engage all 8. Time stops when the last plate falls. Miss a plate, and it costs you 3 seconds. The math was straightforward, and the message was clear. This was a speed event, and the fastest gun won. The competitors in Gregory's squad ran it the way they had trained to run it. Clean, efficient, aggressive. The first shooter posted 3.3 seconds with his AR platform in a Holosun red dot, 8 plates clean, no re-engagements. The second ran 3.7 with 1 miss, adjusted to 6.7, which drew a sympathetic wince from the group. The third posted 3.4, also clean. The fourth ran 4.1 and caught a hard time about it from the man standing next to him, who had just done 3.3 and was feeling generous enough to comment. The broad-shouldered man from the parking lot, the one who had pointed, whose name turned out to be Cody, ran it in 3.5 seconds, clean, and stepped back from the line with the satisfied expression of a man who had done what he came to do. Then, Gregory stepped up. He loaded 8 rounds through the gate with the unhurried precision of a man threading a needle. Not slow, but deliberate, each cartridge seated with a small, definitive click. He shouldered the rifle. He settled his eye behind the rear sight. He did not roll his shoulders or shake out his hands or take a visible breath. He simply became still in the way that certain men become still before something happens. The buzzer sounded. What followed did not look like a lever-action rifle being operated by a human hand. The first plate rang and fell. Then the second, then the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth in a sequence so compressed and so rhythmically even that the individual shots dissolved into something that sounded continuous. A sustained mechanical pulse, 8 distinct impacts delivered with the cadence of an engine finding its operating speed. The lever was moving between each shot, cycling around, cocking the hammer, returning to battery, but you could not see it. You could only hear the action and watch the results. 8 plates, every one of them down. 3.5 seconds. The number itself was unremarkable. Middle of the squad, matching Cody's time exactly. But the squad was not reacting to the number. They were standing in the particular silence of people who have just witnessed something their eyes cannot fully account for. A bolt action makes one shot and stops. A semi-automatic fires as fast as you pull the trigger. What they had just seen was neither of those things, and their brains were still sorting out what category it belonged to. Cody said nothing. He watched the old man move down the line, crouching slightly, collecting each spent casing from the ground one at a time and placing them in his jacket pocket. He reloaded his own ammunition, had done it for decades, wasn't about to stop now. Stage 2 was where the optics crowd expected to separate themselves from the rest of the field, and in most years they were right. The format was straightforward: 2 paper silhouettes at 60 yards, 10 rounds total, 90 seconds on the clock. 5 rounds per target, scored by ring placement. Center mass paid 10 points. The outer rings dropped to 8, 6, 4. A miss paid nothing. Maximum possible score was 100, and the stage had been designed with the understanding that hitting a precise point on a target at 60 yards, under time pressure, on a course where your heart rate was already elevated, was genuinely difficult. Magnified optics made it less difficult. Iron sights made it considerably harder. Word from Stage 1 had begun to move through the event the way word moves at small competitions, quietly, person to person, with the slightly hushed quality of information that people are not yet sure what to do with. By the time Gregory's squad rotated to Stage 2, there were a handful of people standing at the back of the bay who had not been there for any of the previous squads. Gregory studied the targets for a moment, then stepped to the bench. He loaded 6 rounds through the gate and placed 4 more on the bench surface in a single row, standing upright on their bases, arranged with the careful spacing of a man who had thought through exactly what his hands would need to do, and in what order. 6 in the rifle, 4 on the bench, 90 seconds on the clock. He fired the first round inside 3 seconds of the buzzer. Through the spotting scope at the range officer's table, the hole appeared inside the 10 ring of the near silhouette. He worked the lever. The second round landed less than an inch from the first. Third, fourth, fifth. Each one finding the same small neighborhood of cardboard at the center of the target. The group tightening with each shot rather than opening the way groups open when fatigue or time pressure enters the equation. Then the reload. He tilted the rifle, and his left hand moved to the bench and fed the 4 loose cartridges through the loading gate with a speed that pulled the breath out of the people watching. Not dramatic speed, not showy, not performed. Just the speed of emotion that has been repeated so many thousands of times that it no longer requires thought. 4 rounds in under 5 seconds. Lever closed. He pivoted to the second silhouette and fired the remaining 4 rounds. Time was called. He had used 51 of his 90 seconds. The range officer scored the targets and then looked at them again and then picked up his radio. The request for verification drew a second officer across the bay. Both men examined the cardboard carefully, counting holes, checking ring placement. Score 98 out of 100. 2 rounds kissing the edge of the 10 ring still inside the 9, every other hole dead center. The closest competitor in the field would finish the stage with a 91. Derek Cass was 20 yards away when he heard the number. He was 29 years old, 2-time defending champion, with a magnified optic on his rifle that cost more than Gregory's truck payment. He heard 98, and he went completely still. He stopped the conversation he was in the middle of. He turned and looked across the range at the old man in the olive jacket, who was once again collecting his brass from the ground, one casing at a time, unhurried, as if the score on the board behind him was someone else's business entirely. Derek Cass did not say anything, he just watched, and he did not stop watching for the rest of the day. Stage 3 had a reputation that preceded it. The course had been designed several years earlier by a former special operations instructor named Burwell, who had built it with one stated intention: to find out what a shooter actually did when thinking became a liability. 3 barricades, 4 shooting positions, 10 targets spread across a range of distances from 15 to 45 yards, some partially obscured behind barriers, 2 of them mounted on a rail system that swung them left to right on an interval that was not quite predictable. The course rewarded explosive movement, clean transitions, and the particular kind of calm that only exists in people who have learned to make decisions faster than their nerves can register the stakes. During the walkthrough, the competitors moved through the empty course in small groups, studying angles and planning sequences. Most of them were already running mental simulations, mapping their footwork, deciding which targets to take first from which positions. Gregory walked the course once, slowly, with his hands in his jacket pockets. He asked the range officer one question. "How fast does the rail move?" The officer told him. Gregory nodded once and said nothing else. He loaded 6 rounds and placed 8 more in his left jacket pocket, arranged not in a cluster, but in a deliberate sequence, positioned by feel so his fingers would find them in order without looking. He had done this before, not at a competition. But he had done it before, in conditions where the consequence of a fumbled reload was not a time penalty. When the buzzer sounded, he did not explode off the line the way the younger competitors did, all kinetic aggression and forward lean. He moved with a controlled economy that read as unhurried right up until you tried to time it and discovered it was not. He reached the first barricade and was already acquiring the nearest target before his boot had finished its last step. The shot broke clean. He transitioned, fired twice more, and was moving to the second position before the last target had finished reacting. The reloads came twice, both on the move, both executed without breaking stride. His left hand found the cartridges in his pocket by feel alone, fed them through the loading gate one after another, while the rifle stayed shouldered and the muzzle stayed oriented downrange. He did not slow down. He did not look at his hands. The cartridges went where they were supposed to go because 50 years of repetition had made the geometry of the motion as automatic as breathing. He caught one of the rail targets mid-swing and took it clean. The second he waited on for a half second, reading its rhythm, then broke the shot at the precise center of its arc. His raw time was 3rd in the squad. After accuracy penalties were applied across the field, his combined score moved him to 2nd place overall. The gap between him and Derek Cass was 3 points. One stage remained. The gallery that had started the morning loose and wandering had, by this point, fully assembled. Nobody was drifting anymore. Nobody was checking their phones. They were standing at the fence with the focused quiet of people who understood that something was happening that they would probably describe to someone else later and wanted to get the details right. The lunch break was 45 minutes. Most of the competitors used it the way competitors use breaks at events like this, standing in clusters near their vehicles, talking about the morning stages, running post-mortems on their runs, adjusting equipment, checking zero. The parking lot hummed with the particular energy of people who were still very much in competition mode, still calculating, still performing, even when nothing was being scored. Gregory ate alone at the far end of a picnic table near the tree line, with his back to the pavilion and his face toward the woods. He had a sandwich wrapped in wax paper and a thermos of black coffee. He sat with his back straight, not rigidly, not performatively, just straight, the way men sit who spent formative years being told that slouching was a choice, and choices had consequences. He ate without hurrying. He looked at the trees, The YouTube crew found him about 20 minutes into the break. There were two of them, a young woman with a wireless microphone and a young man with a camera that he carried with the slightly self-conscious ease of someone who had not been doing it long enough for it to feel natural. The woman introduced herself and asked if Gregory would be willing to talk on camera about his morning. He looked at her the way he had looked at the registration form. Not unkindly, but with the measured consideration of a man who does not spend words before he has decided they are worth spending. He told her to come back after the last stage. She nodded and began to turn away. Then she stopped and turned back, the way people turn back when they have been holding a question and decide the cost of not asking it is higher than the cost of asking. "Can I ask, why the liver gun?" Gregory looked at her for a long moment. The kind of moment that has enough weight in it that the person on the receiving end understands instinctively that what they are being offered is not a deflection but a promise. "After," he said. She nodded and left. Gregory finished his sandwich and poured the last of the coffee from the thermos into the cap and drank it slowly, still looking at the tree line. Then he screwed the cap back onto the thermos with 2 deliberate turns. The unhurried motion of a man closing something he fully intends to open again, and set it on the table beside him. The camera, still running from a distance, caught the jacket in the afternoon light. And for the first time, if you were watching closely enough, you could see it, above the left breast pocket, in the worn olive fabric, a shadow. A rectangle of cloth slightly darker than the surrounding material, the ghost of something that had been sewn there for a long time and removed. The size and shape of a name tape. The camera held on it for 3 seconds and moved on. It didn't need to linger. Some things explain themselves if you know how to look. The weather had shifted during the lunch break in the way October weather shifts in eastern Tennessee, not gradually, but all at once, as if someone had made a decision. The sky that had been thin and pale all morning was now the color of worn concrete, low and flat and pressing down on the tree line. The temperature had dropped 10 degrees. People had gone to their vehicles for jackets. Gregory was already wearing his. Stage 4 drew the largest crowd of the day. Competitors who had finished their runs and should have been packing gear were standing at the fence instead. Club members who had heard something through the telephone chain of a small organization had driven out mid-afternoon and were standing in the gravel with their hands in their pockets. The YouTube crew had both cameras deployed. One on a tripod behind the line for the wide shot, one handheld off to the side to catch the shooter's face and the rifle's action simultaneously. The match director stood near the scorer's table with his arms crossed and the expression of a man watching something he had not planned for and was not sure how to categorize. The format was pure and unambiguous. 10 steel plates at 25 yards. Fastest time wins. No accuracy weighting, no penalty calculation, no combined scoring. Hit the plate, it falls, move to the next one. If a plate doesn't fall, you re-engage until it does. Every semi-automatic shooter in the remaining field had 30 rounds in the magazine and no interruption between the first shot and the last. Gregory stepped to the bench and loaded 6 rounds through the gate. Then he placed 5 loose cartridges on the bench surface in a single row, standing upright, evenly spaced, with the precise arrangement of a man who has already run this problem in his mind and knows exactly what his hands will need and when. 11 rounds total. 10 plates, 1 margin for error. The range officer looked at him. Gregory nodded. The buzzer sounded. The first 6 plates fell in 2.8 seconds. Not one at a time. In a sequence so tight and unbroken it registered as a single sustained event, the lever cycling between each shot with a speed that made the mechanism disappear. 6 rounds, 6 plates, 2.8 seconds, and then the rifle tilted and the left hand moved. What happened next would be watched in slow motion by several thousand people over the following weeks. Gregory's left hand came off the forend and swept the 5 cartridges off the bench, not one at a time, but all 5 at once, held between his fingers like a card dealer mid-spread, and fed them through the loading gate in a single flowing sequence. 5 rounds. 2.1 seconds. The lever closed. The last 4 plates fell in 1.4 seconds. The timer read 6.3. 10 plates. One reload by hand mid-run, 0 misses. With a lever-action rifle and iron sights, at 67 years old, the range was silent for 2 full seconds, not the polite pause between runs. A genuine collective silence, the kind that arrives when a room full of people is processing the same thing at the same time, and none of them have found the words yet. Then one person started clapping, and the sound of it was enough to break whatever was holding everyone else. And it came all at once, and did not stop. Derek Cass was the last to shoot. He stepped to the line with the focused calm of a champion who understood exactly what was required of him. His AR was loaded, zeroed, tuned. 30 rounds in the magazine, red dot crisp in the gray afternoon light. He had run stages like this hundreds of times. He was fast, genuinely, impressively, undeniably fast, and everyone watching knew it. He ran the plates clean, no re-engagements, no hesitation, smooth transitions from left to right across the rack. The timer read 6.6. The two-time defending champion of the Ironside Open had just run the stage of his life and lost by 0.3 of a second to a 67-year-old man who had stopped in the middle of the run to reload by hand. The math was simple. What it meant was something else entirely. The applause was still settling when Cody crossed the range. Not Derek Cass, who was standing near the scorer's table with his rifle at his side and an expression that had moved past disappointment into something more considered. Not the match director, who was reviewing the final numbers with the careful attention of a man who wanted to be certain before he said anything out loud. Not the YouTube crew, who were still rolling and had the good instincts to stay back and let whatever was about to happen without a microphone in its face. Cody, the broad-shouldered man from the parking lot. The one whose arm had gone up that morning, whose voice had carried, whose laugh had given the group permission to follow. He walked across the range with the particular gait of a man who has made a decision and is carrying it before he has figured out exactly what to say when he gets there. Gregory was at the bench, packing the lever gun into its canvas case with the same unhurried deliberateness he brought to everything else. He heard the footsteps and looked up. Cody stopped a few feet away. He did not have a speech prepared. It was visible on his face. The absence of rehearsal, the slight forward lean of someone who has something to say and is finding the words in real time. "Sir," he said, "I owe you an apology." Gregory looked at him. There was no heat in his expression, no satisfaction, no theater, no pause calculated to let the man feel the weight of the morning before offering relief. Just a steady, even look from a face that had seen enough of the world to know the difference between a man performing remorse and a man actually carrying it. "No," Gregory said quietly. "You owe me nothing. But next time, watch before you talk." Cody nodded. He extended his hand. Gregory took it, and the handshake was brief and direct, and said everything that needed saying. Derek Cass came next. He stopped beside Gregory and was quiet for a moment in the way that athletes are quiet after a loss that taught them something. Not sullen, but genuinely still. Then he asked the question that had been building in the room since stage 1. The one that everyone present had wanted to ask and had not known how. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" Gregory was quiet for a moment. He set the canvas case down on the bench and looked at it, and something in his face shifted. Not dramatically, but perceptibly, like a door opening inward. "2 tours in Vietnam," he said. "1 in the Gulf. And before all of that, my father. In a field behind our house in Hancock County. With this rifle, I was 9 years old." He picked up the lever gun and held it for a moment. "This is his. He brought it home from Korea. I've been shooting it for 58 years. The words settled over the group the way certain true things settle. Not loudly, but completely, filling the available space until there was no room left for anything else. The younger men standing nearby who did not know Korea or Vietnam or the Gulf as anything more than chapters in a history course felt the weight of it anyway. The way you feel the depth of water you cannot see the bottom of. The match director stepped forward with the final sheet and read the standings without ceremony because none was needed. Gregory Jennings, competitor number 7. Overall winner of the Ironside Open. The applause that followed was not the competitive courtesy that gets extended to every finisher. It came from somewhere lower and more honest than that, and it lasted considerably longer than anyone had planned for. The video went up 10 days later. The title was plain. They said he was holding it wrong. No dramatic thumbnail text beyond what the image already said on its own. An old man at the line, eye behind iron sights, and behind him, a pointed finger. Within 3 weeks, it had been viewed 6 million times. Veterans groups shared it without caption or comment. It did not need one. Firearms forums spent thousands of words debating the mechanics of the reload, the lever technique, the ballistics of the 30-30 at competition distances. People who had never held a firearm in their lives watched it and shared it because they understood correctly that it was not about firearms at all. It was about something that does not have a clean single word. The intersection of mastery and memory, and the particular dignity of a man who has nothing left to prove and shows up anyway. Gregory did not see the video. He did not have a social media account and had no intention of acquiring one. He found out about it approximately 3 weeks after the event when his granddaughter called him on a Sunday afternoon and told him he was famous. He was quiet for a moment, in the way he was quiet before most things he said. "For what?" he asked. She told him. He listened without interrupting. "Tell them to come to the range," he said, "if they want to learn something." Fort Trace changed, not overnight, not with any announcement or formal shift in policy, but it changed the way the river had changed the course of the club years earlier. Grain by grain, quietly, until the difference was visible. The older members who had stopped entering competitions began appearing on the sign-up sheets again. A man in his mid-60s brought a bolt-action rifle his grandfather had hunted with for 40 years. Another brought a single-shot .22 he had owned since he was 12 years old. They did not win. They did not expect to. But they were on the line, and the younger members made room and asked questions and listened to the answers in the way people listen when they have recently been reminded that experience is not the same thing as age. Derek Cass posted a photograph 3 weeks after the Ironside Open. A lever-action Henry in 30-30, brand new, the bluing still perfect and unscratched. The caption read, "Starting from zero. Apparently I have work to do." Gregory saw it months later when his granddaughter showed him on her phone. He looked at it for a long time. Then he said, "He's got the stance right. Tell him to slow down before he speeds up." There was the faintest trace of something on his face when he said it. Not quite a smile, but close enough. The trophy sits on a shelf in Gregory's house in Hancock County. It is small and brass-plated and unremarkable in the way that objects are unremarkable until you know what stands beside them. Next to the trophy is a folded flag in a triangular case. Next to the flag is a photograph, black and white, slightly faded, of a lean young man standing in a field behind a farmhouse, holding a lever-action rifle at his side, squinting into the Tennessee sun. He looks impossibly young. He is smiling in the uncomplicated way that young men smile before the world has finished with them. It was taken the year before he shipped to Korea. Gregory's father. He came home. Not everyone did. Gregory walks past that shelf every morning on his way to the kitchen to make coffee. He does not slow down. He does not stop and stand before it the way people stand before monuments. He does not need to. He carries that man with him in a way that has nothing to do with proximity. In every lever stroke, in every sight picture, in every arc of brass catching the morning light before it hits the ground. The rifle is still his father's. The hands on it are older now, more lined, slower to warm up on cold mornings. But they are still steady, they are still precise, and they are still here. Which is more than can be said for a great many men who stood where Gregory Jennings stood, in places that do not appear on any tourist map, in the noise and the dark and the fog of a long time ago. If you believe that some things only get sharper with age, skill, purpose, the quiet dignity of a man who has earned every second of his silence, then this story was for you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. There is someone in your life right now who needs to be reminded that dedication compounds, that mastery does not expire, and that the man everyone is pointing at might be the one they should have been listening to all along. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one. Hit the like button. It takes 2 seconds, and it helps more people find their way to Gregory Jennings and his father's rifle, and the 10 plates that fell before anyone could finish their laugh. Because the lesson was never about the gun. It was about what 58 years of showing up looks like when it finally steps to the line. Type legend in the comments if this story moved you. I'll see you in the next one.